It's lively and unrehearsed. It's our weekly discussion program. We call it Moral Side of the News. And as always, we're glad you're alongside. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel again this week. Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. And Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church. Back in the news this week, should the pandemic-era rent moratorium be extended? It expired last week and now has been reinstated by the Centers for Disease Control. The CDC says surveys show nearly 7 million renters were behind on their rent in June and suggested mass evictions were likely if the moratorium was not reinstated. So now turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News, relief for renters, but difficulty for landlords. Your thoughts?
I think we're spending the money in the right way to help people avoid eviction and also help the landlords pay their mortgages and the upkeep on their property. It does go both ways. But I've been thinking about this, and there's something here that makes me think that we live in a rather obscene world. We live in a world where people are homeless, where people fear eviction. It's not the 1930s anymore. It's not the Great Depression, or is it? I just am so vexed the way that people are ignored and their situations are not dealt with. Driving anywhere, you see people under underpasses holding signs, homeless and starving. Homeless and starving, this is the United States of America. It shouldn't happen anywhere in the world, but how much the more so, it shouldn't happen in our country. This is not what we're about.
I agree. It's a sad state of affairs for both renters as well as landlords. I think that with previous CARES Act funding that has been given by our federal government to make sure that businesses stay afloat and stay alive, and that's an appropriate response to this pandemic. We're in a once-in-a-lifetime event that still exists. It is interesting to me that we can quickly give resources for corporations and for businesses, and we should do that to try to maintain as much of the economy as we can. But we have to do the same thing for the average person that's struggling. I agree. It is not a good look, and we are a better country than to have people out on the street homeless and being evicted, especially by no choice of their own. This is not a situation of person with having issues of being derelict in their responsibility. Millions of people lost their jobs. Millions of people have not been able to be hired, and they have tried application after application, and they still have not been hired. And this is what, in my view, this is what government is for. It's not, I hate that these types of programs get framed erroneously like socialism. We use these misunderstood political terms to talk about human suffering. I think that the government should act quickly to give assistance to renters, and indirectly, because of that, it helps landlords be able to maintain their properties and their mortgages as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are certain insecurities that can be felt by people that really have multiple costs.
Yes.
And I would think of housing is one of them, along with food and medical insecurities. Those have more than just the cost of someone not having a house, not having a place to stay at night, but the costs are also emotional they also have to do with a sense of stability, and as well as many other kinds of emotional and other ways where that kind of well-being is not established. It's something very close to the human person when you consider the importance of housing, like food, like medicine. And so I think the protection of that actually helped prevent a number of calls to a whole community and to help us to reestablish back to some economic normalcy. So I think, as Kilen stated, or most appropriately, that if we're giving aid to businesses, which is good, it helps keep sort of the economy stable, people employed, things like that. That it's also very good to do some support for people in need, who are in need of housing, and with the pandemic, with people being sick or the new numbers of people hospitalized because of COVID, this really is something that's necessary for a community. On the positive end, just in a sense, restating what I said before, someone loses a home, there's so much cost. When a person who's homeless gains a home, there is so much benefit. And it's more than just a bed to sleep in at night. It is something about a sense of well-being, their emotional well-being, holistic sense there, a sense also of stability and the promise and hope that gives to someone. So a home means a lot, to people. And so any way that we can help keep that secure, I think, does numerous benefits for society, for all of us.
It's a building block to building a life for a family or for an individual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, it makes good business sense. To me, it makes good business sense for the business sector to partner with nonprofit sector, to partner with the religious sector, to partner with government, to eradicate in this country there should not be anything such as homelessness in a nation like this. And we can do this. This is something that is possible, but it is political will or the lack thereof. And I would say a spiritual vacuum in many spaces of our nation that is okay with people losing their home and blaming persons for losing their home when the economics of their life is just really struggle. We have such the way that this gets socially and politically framed is the nemesis of us being able to provide the types of safety nets and supports. We have to be able to know that when we help the person keep their home, yes, it benefits their family. Yes, it helps for healing of the mind and the spirit, but it makes good business sense. There's so much economic savings that happens when we are sure that people are safe out from homelessness and in a place that's safe for them.
And Kilen, you mentioned about people labeling this as socialism.
Yeah.
And I see that this kind of labeling as just simply terrible demonization of people in dire and severe need. Yeah, there's government aid, there are food programs. Well, what's our choice? Help people out, help them put a roof over their head, help them not starve to death.
Yes.
That's not socialism. That's biblical. That's a manifestation of how we love our neighbor as ourselves.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing socialistic about that. We're talking about a concept that's 4,000 years old, but somehow people still don't embrace it, sadly. And people who refer to themselves as religious people, it doesn't add up to any definition that I have of religious. They may be observant of their faith traditions, They may go to their church or mosque or synagogue faithfully every week, but they're observant, but by any yardstick that I can come up with, they're not very religious.
Well, the feeding of the 5,000 was not a socialist program. We celebrate that miracle religiously and in our places of worship. And yet Jesus used resources available to him to ensure that every single person, plus women and children, were afforded a meal because they spent all day long with him on the hillside. I think that is just as biblical as it can be. And I, like you, question any religious person that would want to castigate the poor and those who are down on their luck and blame them for their economic status as if they're derelicts or whatever. That's just insidious. It hurts and it pains us as a nation while we are excessively spending in other places on the budget line, on the national budget line, with just excess, just extreme excess of spending, not to mention the many times that we've spent on wars where we had uncounted millions of dollars lost and taken and pilfered by God knows who. And yet when it comes to our own people, our own citizens that are trying to just survive and thrive, we find ways to demonize them, blame them for their plight. It is so un-American and it's definitely unbiblical.
All right, we're off to a good start on our program this week with our panel, Moral Side of the News. More pandemic news here. More large companies here at home are requiring staff to get COVID-19 vaccines. That as COVID cases continue to climb. Norton Healthcare, Baptist Health, and Churchill Downs have joined the list of Kentuckiana companies to require their staffs to be vaccinated. Turning back to our panel, where do you weigh in on companies saying the safety of their employees and their families usurps freedom of choice to vaccinate?
I think it's absurd that I think it's right and proper for these healthcare units and for Churchill Downs to do that, because you're talking about environments with a lot of people coming in doing a lot of things. And if we're going to beat this pandemic, we have to get enough people vaccinated so that we reach this herd that will negate the situation. It makes all the sense in the world. In fact, to me, it makes no sense at all to say, especially, how much the more so, in a medical facility, in a hospital, well, it's your choice. If you want to get vaccinated, you may, but if you don't, come on into work and deal with people.
First responder spaces where you're going to be interacting with the public, including restaurants, bars, including places where you're interacting with people, there should be a requirement. And I think that there is Supreme Court precedence that supports that when it comes to the general public safety, that governments have the responsibility and companies and corporations have the right to require that. Private companies and private schools and private entities also have the right to not do so as well, which adds to the complication of this thing. We're living from the unfortunate fruit of the second big lie, the one big lie that had to do with the election, but then the other big lie that this was a hoax. This entire COVID-19 pandemic was a hoax, and that it was a creation of progressives or the liberal side of the political spectrum. And there are many people that still live with that mistaken notion, to the deaths of hundreds of thousands and to the millions who have become ill, and now another swing of this virus. I agree with those companies making that step. And if anything that's less than a mandated requirement should be the requirement to wear masks. If that should just be elementary.
We have freedoms as human beings, but we have to be careful on how we think of that notion. And that is, our freedom is not so absolute that it compromises public safety. And so I think it's appropriate for some places to begin mandating, and we may see more sanctions around vaccinations for COVID in the future. I don't know what they would be. It's possible. To spur people on to get vaccinated. And I really do think that we need to think about dropping the notion that we don't get vaccinated just because we're free. And I just don't, I think that thought is an error. We have many other freedoms that we ought to prize that are important for us, that we can live in the United States, but not to think of absolute all freedoms to the danger of people. I just don't think I don't think that that's appropriate to do. And so I noticed in reading about this, the question that these companies do make exceptions for those who have religious differences. And so there's a certain freedom there still that's still respected. My assumption is, I didn't read about this, but people who may not be able to take the vaccine for medical reasons, my assumption is that they would be ones who would be exempt too from this rule. But I really, it's said a lot, but I have this real hope that more people hear the message about the importance of being vaccinated, and not to take that obligation lightly, but actually to make it has become so available that I see. And I realize some people may still have difficulty getting there or something like that, but to make a point of trying to do that for the sake of the health of yourself and for the health of other people around you.
It seems to me that there's a theme of this false dichotomy between individual freedom and community safety that's undergirded by many faith traditions and many over the last few years, if not 20 or so years, a parallel to the culture of this high individualized way of being as a culture, that along with culture, with becoming more and more focused on the individual instead of the collective, we see our faith traditions mirroring that within culture. And so what comes with that are pseudo-faith formulations or new faith formulations that tend to try to justify with erroneous interpretations of scripture put the case of the individual over the safety of others. And I wonder if for instance, we heard one of the legislators in one of the states describe the vaccine as the mark of the beast. So that type of interpretive move where you try to bring in apocalyptic interpretations to a health issue that should be elementary for us, it just complicates things. And I just wonder, it would take some further investigation and some conversation to lift some of those developments within many of our faith spaces that's adding to this situation that we're in right now.
It's not a manifestation of personal freedom. It's a manifestation of dangerous and vexing selfishness.
Yes.
If you're in the workplace and you have vaccinated and unvaccinated people working side by side, what's your advice or thoughts on that? That's a tricky place to be.
Everybody puts on a mask.
That's it.
Simple as that. If someone has a problem with putting on a mask because of their personal freedom, they need to go elsewhere. But minimally, we mask up again.
And I think that's the most current CDC guidance right now, is that whether you're vaccinated or not, you put a mask on. And I think that minus a vaccine mandate, that should be required. That if you're working in an inside space within a company or a workplace, everybody should wear a mask. Customers coming in for service should wear a mask. That should be mandated.
We've gone about as far as we can go so far. But if there are people who insist on not getting vaccinated, if there are people who are not masking, we're going to go back to a lockdown. And that would be a catastrophe on so many levels. We're trying, with what the CDC is trying to do, it's trying to balance things so that we're not going to be on a lockdown yet again, that we will make some progress.
The whole vaccinated, unvaccinated, and with folks together has been sort of mirrors a tension between those masking and non-masking, and those tensions that have been throughout the pandemic. And to think that I think we want to put some things in our mindset. One would be, in as much to be considerate of other people, to be caring for other people. And I think that could begin by seeking vaccination, that you're not only doing it for yourself, but you're also doing it for others, for the community around you. To wear a mask because you're caring for other people. And then you come to a place when you're with others, you can't always control other people's behavior, to seek to be as peaceful and as diplomatic as possible, that together we're going to get through this, and to be hope-filled about it. Because some people are not vaccinated because of medical reasons. There's things like that. They're immunocompromised. So we've got those populations out there, and the sense is that we need to, with all of this in mind, as important it is to be as gentle and considerate with one another as we can, and to seek to be in that way, to build up a real healthy population that is not only physically healthy, but also relationally and socially healthy as well.
You know what? I want to finish our program with a thought on that, gentle and considerate. Let's talk about the Olympics for a minute. They've wrapped up, and new world records and breathtaking performances have occurred, but also making headlines, the mental health of elite athletes, as well as acts of kindness. Panel, you may have seen two runners, one from the U.S., the other from Botswana, get tangled and tumbled to the ground. Rather than get angry, they helped each other to their feet, put their arms around each other, and finished together. And two high jumpers who decided to share the gold medal instead of having a jump off. So your thoughts on sportsmanship appearing to be alive and well?
I think the Olympians are just such fabulous role models. First of all, that they had the courage to travel to Tokyo and compete. But more than that, their acts are proving that we're really one planet. They're proving the humanity of the human race.
The Olympics being sort of the relationality of the Olympics being a story that carries further besides even when the games are over. And I think these are beautiful stories to know about how we relate to one another. They're good stories for nations to learn about diplomacy. They're good stories to hear about communities, whole communities being charitable with other communities, about people being charitable to the stranger, of having that sense of an understanding of the importance of having unity as people. And those stories from the Olympics bring it out. And even as it's a story in the midst of a people being competitive, that even in the midst of competition, of pretty fierce competition, where all of that time spent up for that moment, that there's also a place where a person can be charitable and thoughtful towards their competitor. That's something to really remember and to treasure.
Would to God that we would return to those days in our nation's capital, when politicians on either side of the aisle would fiercely defend their particular position. And then after the bell rung at the end, they would go and have a drink together or have some family fellowship together, recognizing one another's humanity. Those examples from the Olympics give witness to the fact that these athletes know what it took for each of them to get where they are, that Tokyo was just not something that they were lucky to do. They worked hard, they trained hard. The tears, the pain of body exertion and mental exertion to get to the level of the world's best athletes. And then when human things happen, how very easily human connection is made in that. It's a lesson for all of us that as human beings, just like those athletes, we have no idea of the struggle. It is a struggle to be a human being. It is a struggle to be able to maintain family and work requirements. And when we see someone down, no matter the stripe, no matter the political party, no matter where a person is, it is just as easy for us to lend a helping hand to one another than it is to castigate one another. I pray for the day that we can get back to that space where we, no matter what we believe, no matter the political persuasion, that we remember that we're human first. I love those stories.
Kilen, yeah, you make a great point. I like to hear, and I hope that certainly I heard it about the sense of the importance of a healthy balance in our government between the partisan and the bipartisan. That somehow we've lost that balance, and to regain that back, it would be as something great for us, for our government, for good government, for that to occur. And the stories do bring that out.
Their example gives hope for the potential
Yes.
of a better world.
Yeah.
A potential that we all need to help realize.
We have about a minute left. Quick thoughts on how do we spread that to the rest of mankind, humankind?
We do what we've been called to do. We tell the story of the one who did it, the one who shared love and action. And all of our faith traditions have the scripture, and we have practice, and we have ritual, and we have faith. I think that's what we as faith leaders throughout our religious traditions, we do that. We do that on a daily basis. And if we can encourage not only in our places of worship, but outside our community, and become very engaged in community, to just keep holding up that reminder to us that we are as human, the most holy that we will ever be is human. And so if we can just continue to get that message out to all of our parishioners and our faith adherents, I think that's the beginning.
A great way to end our program this week, Moral Side of the News. Thank you to Kilen Gray, Stan Miles, and John Stoltz. A reminder, you can catch this program again on YouTube, and you can also get it as a podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find Moral Side of the News. Thanks, panel. Have a great week, and be safe and stay well.